My ex-boyfriend fell in love with my younger sister. In front of me, he took extremely good care of her and even had sex with her. Later, I got together with someone else. He then knelt at my feet, his forehead pressed against the back of my hand, saying, "Nora, I was wrong. It won't happen again." On my birthday, my younger sister and my ex-boyfriend showed up together. They appeared holding hands, looking very affectionate. In the past, in public, he would always just stand casually beside me, with the hand close to me stuffed in his pocket, as if avoiding something. He had never held my hand like that before. Ethan looked natural, with a smile on his lips, looking much happier than when he was with me. He said, "Happy birthday, Nora." I still remember the first time we met was on the subway. Something slipped out of his pocket. I kindly picked it up for him only to find that the packaging was really embarrassing. I didn't know whether to return it or just throw it away. At that time, noticing something, he turned to look at me, with a slightly mischievous smile on his face, saying, "Little sister, give my chewing gum back to me." It wasn't chewing gum at all. It was clearly a box of condoms. My cheeks instantly flushed. Later, when we got to know each other better, I asked him why he would carry such a thing with him that day. Was he rushing to do something unmentionable? I knew he didn't have a girlfriend. Ethan looked innocent, spreading his hands, saying, "I'm a virgin." My thoughts were pulled back to the present. My sister looked a bit nervous, forcing a smile at me uneasily, saying, "Sister, Ethan and I." Her voice was very soft and low, so I had to lean down a little to hear the rest of what she said. But Ethan pulled her back a step. I was stunned. Inappropriately, I remembered the embarrassing situation that day. At Ethan's house, we bumped into his father and my aunt. In the unbearable scene of them entwined on the bed, facing the screams and chaos, Ethan at that time had an expressionless face and pulled me out. Then, when crossing the overpass, he suddenly bent down and vomited for no reason. He was full of disgust, sweating profusely. I felt so bad, but didn't know what to say. I could only purse my lips and pat his back soothingly. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, leaning his body weight on me, saying in a hoarse voice, "Nora, let's be together." But it was also this person who proposed to break up after a year of dating, saying that he didn't want to deceive me and that he didn't like me. It turned out that the one he liked was also my younger sister. When did they start having feelings for each other? When I was still with Ethan as his girlfriend, his absent-mindedness, his being hot and cold all of a sudden had the most reasonable explanations. I still remember the first time I took him to meet my sister. Ethan had his hands in his pockets, said very few words, just greeted her, but there seemed to be something different in the way he looked at her. Then, he curled his lips slightly in a contemptuous way. My sister had always been carefree, but that day her face turned surprisingly red. At that time, I didn't notice these details. After the breakup, I was in a daze. For the first time, I understood that what was described in novels about the world falling apart wasn't an exaggeration at all. I always felt that his shadow was everywhere in my life, but that person, how could he just disappear? I became the kind of person I used to despise the most. From starting to expect Ethan to change his mind and call me, to later throwing away my self-esteem and begging him to get back together. However, I never got any response from the beginning to the end. At that time, my sister hugged me, crying and scolding Ethan bitterly, saying that he wasn't worth my liking. Yes, he wasn't worth it. Looking at my sister's evasive eyes, I thought to myself that I should be glad that 3 months after the breakup, I had gradually recovered. If it had been the old me seeing this scene, I might have broken down on the spot. I even smiled at them, saying, "You're just in time. Let's cut the cake." Ethan looked at me as if he could see through my emotions. Regarding snatching Ethan away, my sister felt guilty towards me. Later, at home, she held my hand, looking full of guilt, saying that she had tried to refuse. She was afraid that I would be sad. She had hesitated for a long, long time and even blocked him. But liking someone is something you can't help. Even if her reason told her it was wrong, she still couldn't stop thinking about him. My sister stared at me as if trying to find signs of my being mollified, saying, "Sister, you can understand, right? I smiled and said, you and he got together after we broke up. You didn't do anything wrong to me. I was looking into her eyes when I said this. A trace of panic flashed across my sister's eyes. She nodded. After getting my forgiveness, my sister began to try to reconcile the relationship among the three of us. She deliberately asked Ethan to buy milk tea for me, asked Ethan to carry my bag for me. When eating out, she would ask Ethan to peel the shrimps for me and put them in my bowl, and Ethan agreed to everything. After buying fruits for me under the scorching sun, he would look at my sister and smile helplessly. If it weren't for my sister, I'm afraid I wouldn't have known that Ethan had such a gentle and tolerant side. A few days later, my sister, on the pretext of exercising, dragged me to climb a mountain in the suburbs. When we got to the foot of the mountain and got out of the car, Ethan was already waiting for us. He was wearing a windbreaker, looking tall and thin, and was smoking with his head down. My sister frowned, stepped forward, and chided him about something. Ethan stubbed out the cigarette but in the trash can beside him and naturally held her hand. Ethan was a heavy smoker, but she didn't like it. After that, he really smoked a lot less. Something I had been persuading him for half a year without any effect, but she just said that she hated the smell of cigarettes and he changed his long-standing habit. This contrast made me feel a bit amused and sad. Feeling a gaze, I looked up and saw the man behind Ethan. He looked 5 points similar to Ethan, but the contours of his eyes and eyebrows were more three-dimensional, with a kind of gentle handsomeness under the morning sun. He was Ethan's cousin, Oliver. Oliver was my high school classmate. We didn't have much interaction. After the college entrance examination, we went to different universities. All I remembered about him was that he had excellent grades, was quite tall, and looked good. He nodded to me politely. It seemed that he remembered me. He should remember me, right? Walking up the stone steps at the foot of the mountain, my sister's shoelaces came undone. She didn't move, just looked at Ethan expectantly. Ethan paused for a second, then squatted down with a smile and tied her shoelaces for her. Witnessing this scene, I couldn't help but feel a bit self-deprecating. When was Ethan ever so condescending in front of me? In this relationship, I had always been the one playing the role of the protector. Ethan's family wasn't happy. His mother died of depression. 2 years after his wife's death, his father got involved with his sister-in-law. Or rather, when Ethan's mother was still alive, those two had already been having an affair. In the second month after we started dating, I was at his house to celebrate his birthday with him. Ethan got drunk, his blurred eyes fixed on my face, as if exploring my expression, saying, "Do you know? Some people say that I should call my mother Aunt." He said it in a flat tone. "They say that I was born out of the affair of those two." I had already heard about this from others. Hearing this, I shook my head, saying, "They're just talking nonsense." Ethan laughed. "My mother hated me so much. Maybe it's true." I didn't know how to comfort him. I could only stare at him blankly, suppressing the sourness in my eyes. Ethan looked at me with his eyes dark and gloomy for a while, then suddenly pulled me from the carpet to the sofa and then laid his head on my lap, burying his face in my arms. I stroked his hair, feeling pity for a man for the first time in my life. Before that, I had never been in a love relationship. I devoted my whole heart to him, completely and unreservedly. My sister once scolded me in exasperation, saying, "Sister, you're so stupid. Men won't cherish you like this." And it came true. At night, he grabbed the corner of my clothes, begging me not to leave. When the boy you like is willing to show his vulnerability and attachment in front of you, I couldn't say no. That night, he hugged my waist from behind, lying side by side with me, in a closely attached position. When I woke up, I found myself looking at him face to face. Ethan was staring at me without blinking. I don't know how long he had been looking at me like that. The man who would look at me with such eyes had never liked me. Perhaps he just needed someone to accompany him through that toughest stage. The mountain path was getting steeper. My sister turned back uneasily and instructed, "My sister is not coordinated in her limbs. Oliver, please take good care of her. Don't let her fall." Oliver smiled, "I'll protect her from behind. Don't worry." I hadn't exercised for a long time. I climbed the mountain with panting and resting all the way. Finally, I was almost pulled up by Oliver. When we reached the top of the mountain, Ethan and my sister had been waiting for more than 10 minutes. Oliver released my hand, unscrewed the cap of the bottle, and handed the water to me, saying, "Why are you still the same as before? Your face turns red after just running a few steps." I was so angry that I retorted, "Same to you. You're no better either, feasting on your sister's misfortune like this." After putting down my phone, my thoughts involuntarily drifted back to 3 years ago. That summer, the news of the passing of the renowned violinist Haley spread all over the internet. The media and the online community were all lamenting the premature death of such a talented young girl. At that time, the most widespread gossip in school was that Haley was Asher's girlfriend. A musical genius and a medical genius, what a perfect match. But I had been chasing Asher for a long time, and I had never seen Haley by his side. After hearing the news, I hurried to wait downstairs at the hospital where Asher worked. After waiting nervously for a few days, I finally saw Asher. He was still the same as always, so clean that it bordered on being obsessive-compulsive. He didn't look the least bit like the grief-stricken and emaciated person as rumored outside. That was the happiest day of my life. Because for the first time, Asher said a long passage to me. He said, "Sarah, do you have congenital heart disease and are waiting for a heart transplant? I found a donor organ and can help you. As long as you agree, you can undergo the organ transplant surgery soon." This kind of thing was like a dream come true for me. The doctor had once asserted that if I didn't undergo a heart transplant, my life might come to an abrupt end in my 20s. Having the surgery might enable me to live a bit longer. So I agreed almost without hesitation. That day, lying on the cold steel bed in the operating room, the person I liked, wearing a green surgical gown, against the blinding white lights, looked like a god coming to save me. When I woke up, Asher was sitting beside me, his gentle eyes so captivating. He said, "Sarah, will you be my girlfriend?" If I had never known who the owner of the heart was, perhaps my life would have been happy all along. I hardly slept a wink all night. The next morning, I received a call from my assistant. "Sister Sarah, the quota for going to Europe is gone." I sat up in bed, a bit dazed. Teacher Zhai had specially reserved it for me. "How could it be gone? I heard that a really capable senior from your school pulled some strings and got someone else in." Before I could reply to my assistant, Teacher Zhai sent me a text message. "Since you're not feeling well, don't force yourself. Have a good rest." I quickly called Teacher Zhai back. "Teacher Zhai, I'm fine." Teacher Zhai was a bit confused. "Huh? Your Asher called me this morning specifically to turn it down, saying you weren't feeling well. He didn't discuss it with me, Teacher Zhai. I've been waiting for this opportunity for over half a year. Can you?" "It's too late," Teacher Zhai sighed. "He pushed a girl named Hadley in, and the list has already been submitted." With things being like this, I had no other choice but to beg pitifully, "Teacher Zhai, even if it's as a volunteer or a temporary worker, as long as I can go to Europe with the team, I'm willing." "Well, okay, I'll try. Wait for my news." After dealing with these matters, I scrolled through Hadley's Weibo. There was a photo of a registration form. Another day of being pampered. Someone asked below, "That inspection group is really hard to get into. You actually got in?" Hadley replied with an emoji of covering her mouth while laughing, "What can I do? He spoils me, ha ha ha." I just felt a sharp pain in my chest. After taking some medicine, I decided to go to Asher to demand an explanation that he didn't come home last night. He sent me a message in the latter half of the night, saying that he was called back to the hospital to do a surgery. When I got to the hospital, I first went to pick up the medical report. It was a physical examination arranged by Asher a week ago. It showed that everything was normal. The heart function was good, and moderate exercise was okay. I originally wanted to take this report to convince him to let me go to Europe. When I walked to the door of his office, the conversation inside could be heard. "Sarah has been waiting for so long. It's really too much of you to just push her aside like that." The person speaking was Dylan, Asher's college roommate and current colleague. Asher said in a nonchalant tone. What if something happens to her abroad? I won't be able to do anything about it. Come on. I've seen her physical examination report. As long as she takes her medicine regularly, she's as good as a healthy person. We're all professionals. Don't try to fool me with these words. Asher didn't reply. Dylan probed. Don't tell me it's for that woman. Yes. Although I knew it was the fact, hearing Asher say it so bluntly without even thinking still made me feel extremely miserable. Asher's voice was cold and calm. I don't care whether she lives or dies, but the heart can't be damaged. With this sentence, my heart beat violently. And then, an unending heartache followed. I covered my chest and slowly crouched down on the ground, tears streaming out uncontrollably. When I learned the truth about his marriage to me from Hadley's mouth, I had cried once. For a long time, I had been constantly telling myself that people all have feelings. After getting along for a long time, how could one not fall in love? But it turned out that Asher's heart was made of stone. In the end, I didn't barge into the consulting room that day. I sat on a bench in the hospital in a daze for a long time. Until Teacher Zhai sent me a message. There's a volunteer quota, but there will be a lot of odd jobs to do. Do you want to come? I agreed without thinking. Then came Teacher Zhai's confirmation message. Hurry up and pack your luggage. The main group will depart today. On my way back, sitting in a taxi, I tried my best to hold back my sobs. Asher called me, but I hung up on him. In a blink of an eye, I packed my things and went to the airport. Before leaving, I took some important documents with me. Because I wanted to get a divorce. When Hadley saw me at the airport, her expression was very complicated. I was wearing a volunteer uniform, carrying a box of mineral water, and walking up to each member waiting to board the plane, asking them to take some from the box. Hadley, being young and impetuous, couldn't hide her petty thoughts, waving at me triumphantly. Come here, I'm thirsty. I ignored her and walked straight to Teacher Zhai. Teacher Zhai, would you like some water? Hadley got angry. Are you deaf? Can't you hear me talking to you? Using my sister's heart as if it's your right. I snapped back coldly. If you donate a kidney, I'll even kneel down for you. I'm not a person who likes to lose my temper. But seeing that face, I couldn't help it. I think I'm going to go crazy. Every time I see Hadley, I just want to hit her. Hadley whined. Is this how you treat the family members of organ donors? This sentence made the people around point at me and talk. Some even took out their phones to take pictures. Teacher Zhai frowned. Enough. If you want to drink water, get it yourself. Don't make a fuss. It had been so long since anyone had spoken up for me. I hung my head and sat beside, my eyes a bit red. Teacher Zhai, I'm sorry for causing you trouble. Teacher Zhai sighed. I asked you to come, not to let you be bullied. Hadley snorted and turned around to type furiously on her phone. The boarding announcement rang, and everyone boarded the plane one after another. After a flight of more than 20 hours, we arrived in Europe. As soon as the plane landed, several missed calls popped up on my phone. They were all from Asher. I didn't want to talk to him, but he called Hadley instead. After Hadley answered briefly, she handed the phone to me with a gloating look. Asher's voice, as cold as ice, came clearly through the receiver. Sarah, why did you act on your own? He sounded obviously angry. The last time he was like this was when I mentioned divorce. I was full of grievances and made a dry accusation. You also acted on your own when you gave the quota to Hadley without discussing it with me. Hadley let out a disdainful snort, as if laughing at my overreaching. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. It was so long that it made one's heart flutter with unease. I thought Asher would shout at me. But he didn't say anything and just hung up the phone. The beeping busy tone disrupted all my plans. There was no apology, no explanation, and not even an interrogation. All his anger was left in the abruptly ended busy tone, making one constantly doubt oneself, wondering if I had done something wrong. Soon I realized that it shouldn't be like this. I wasn't wrong. It was just that Asher's control over me over the years had made me feel that I was wronged. I wiped away my tears and threw the phone back into Hadley's arms. She let out a startled cry of pain. The next day, the day before we set off for Vienna, I saw Asher at the entrance of the hotel. just as Hadley and I came out of the elevator. The moment she saw Asher, her eyes lit up and she ran over quickly, shouting, "Brother-in-law." Even now, so long after Haley's death, Hadley still insisted on using this form of address and Asher never corrected her. His cold and solemn gaze instantly softened. "I have something to talk to your sister Sarah about. I'll take you to dinner later." Hadley said coyly, "Okay." She gave me a gloating look and I knew it was she who had tipped him off. Asher said seriously, "Sarah, let's talk." In the corner of the hotel lobby, my shrill voice rang out. "I don't think I've done anything wrong. You're not allowed to scold me." Because I was too excited, my eyes turned red again. Much to my dismay, Asher was sitting opposite me. His dark eyes were fixed on my face. For a moment, I suspected that he wanted to strangle me, however, that feeling vanished in an instant. He regained his gentle and refined appearance. In a calm tone, he said, "You haven't done anything wrong. It's me who's wrong." "What do you mean?" "I was wrong in not completely blocking your way." Asher took a sip of hot tea and said slowly, "You can have your fun this time. There won't be a next time." I knew that with his connections, he could easily do these things. I stood up abruptly, seething with anger. "Asher, who do you think you are to control me? I have the right to choose." "Right?" He chuckled, showing no mercy to me anymore. "Using someone else's heart, what rights do you have?" Finally, he said this sentence so directly and brutally. So in his eyes, I should be grateful to be the recipient of this heart. I was so choked up that I could hardly breathe. I picked up the glass of water in front of me and splashed it all over Asher's face. "I'm a patient who has received an organ donation, not your prisoner." The lemonade trickled down Asher's jawline bit by bit. For the first time, a look of sarcasm appeared in those dark eyes. He didn't say anything. Instead, Hadley rushed out from the corner in a panic, took out a handkerchief and wiped his face. "Sarah, who gave you the right to treat my brother-in-law like this?" I couldn't take it anymore and splashed water at her again. The intense emotions made my heart start to race. Darkness flickered before my eyes. Hadley let out a scream as she was drenched. "Brother-in-law, has she gone crazy?" Asher's expression turned completely cold. I thought he would scold me and ask me to apologize to Hadley. But instead, he calmly asked the waiter for some tissues, handed them to Hadley, and gave the waiter an apologetic smile. He said in fluent English, "Sorry, my wife hasn't been in a good mood lately. Sorry for the inconvenience." Everyone present heard this. In public, Asher had described me as a crazy person. Then, he looked down at Hadley with a warning look. "Aren't you hungry? I'll take you to dinner." Hadley knew she had caused trouble and stuck out her tongue. "Okay, Asher." I felt a tightness in my chest and called out to him subconsciously. Asher said in a disappointed tone, "I'm going to Vienna to attend a meeting recently. I'll be on the same trip as you. Do whatever you want. I can't control you anymore. Just remember to take your medicine on time. After a heart transplant, I have to take medicine for a long time to avoid organ rejection." This was what he used to say most often. And then, he led Hadley away. And I was really not feeling well, so I went back to the hotel by myself. The service in the hotel was not good. The food they sent up was cold. I just ate a couple of bites and then went back to bed. I opened my phone and scrolled through Hadley's WeChat moments. The weather was nice. Hadley and Asher were sitting in a fast food restaurant. There was a kid's meal in front of Hadley. Asher was sitting opposite her, looking down at his phone, with a helpless smile on his lips. I felt a bit sad. I wasn't even as carefree as Hadley. She could do whatever she wanted. If something happened, Asher would back her up. But because of this heart, I was walking on eggshells. I couldn't drink, couldn't eat junk food, couldn't stay up late, couldn't have extreme emotions. I didn't even have the right to be happy. Even smiling in front of Asher was a sin. Such a life was so dull. The following itinerary went smoothly according to the plan of the inspection group. We arrived in Vienna on the third day. Asher deliberately postponed his itinerary until the end of the month. Dylan sent me a message. "Well done, Miss Sarah. You've really charmed our Professor Asher. The dean said he'll deduct his salary if he doesn't come back soon." I replied with an emoji of covering my face while laughing. I guess that Asher didn't postpone his itinerary for me. Vienna was the place where Haley had stayed more than once. I heard from Hadley that she begged Asher to go with her to remember her sister. The sky was gradually getting dark. On the busy street with people coming and going, the inspection group was counting the number of people going to the concert. There were only 2 tickets left. Hadley said, "Sarah has a heart disease and is a volunteer, so she doesn't need to go." According to the rules, volunteers should definitely be given lower priority. However, one of these 2 tickets was given to me by Teacher Zhai. Without blinking, I walked past Hadley and took a ticket from the team leader. Hadley stomped her foot in anger. "Sarah, who gave you the right to take the ticket?" I ignored her shouts and walked towards the entrance of the concert hall, but I didn't expect her to call Asher. A few minutes later, she rushed towards me with her phone on speakerphone, bumping into me and making me stagger. "Sarah, you can't go to crowded places. Be obedient. It's for your own good." It was the same old story. Every time, I would convince myself that Asher was doing it for my own good, but this time? Was it still the same? "Asher, can you just shut up?" My voice was shaking. "Just this once, please shut up. She already has 1 ticket. Even if I tear this one up, I won't give it to her." Asher paused. "Okay." Hadley was taken aback by his compromise and glared at me grudgingly. I knew her original plan was to go with Asher. She didn't expect that Asher couldn't handle me. When it was time to check the tickets, I was suddenly stopped by the staff. "Madam, your relative has called us and said that you have a serious heart disease and provided a medical certificate. Sorry, for the sake of your health, we can't let you enter." Everyone had already passed the security check and was waiting for me. The situation was a bit awkward. I patiently explained to the staff, "My heart disease is stable now." "Sorry, we can't be sure about that." For a moment, all the eyes around were focused on me. There were looks of sympathy and surprise. After all, no one expected that Asher, as a husband, would use such means to stop his wife. All along the way, everyone in the team knew that my condition was stable and a small concert wouldn't cause any impact. However, Asher was too authoritative and no for-profit venue was willing to take this risk. Hadley was blocked behind me. She deliberately bumped into me and pushed past me. She then turned around triumphantly and stuck out her tongue at me. "Your ticket is invalid now." At this moment, I had only one thought. If I can't watch the concert, neither can she. Suddenly, I raised my hand and slapped her, then grabbed her hair and dragged her towards the turnstile outside. Because I used some force, Hadley screamed in pain. We scuffled together for the next few minutes. She was young and had great strength in her hands. Technically, it was a mutual brawl. Actually, I didn't want to be so embarrassing in a foreign country either, but too many grievances had piled up. If I didn't fight back, I would go crazy. When Asher arrived, Hadley was squatting on the ground crying hysterically, and I was sitting by the fountain, silent, with blood trickling down from my forehead. Hadley threw herself into Asher's arms, complaining pitifully, "Brother-in-law. Why did she do that? How dare she hit me?" Asher put his coat over Hadley and without even asking about the details, directly ordered me, "Sarah, apologize." I was shaking with anger. "Why isn't she apologizing to me?" "Because you were the one who hit first." I yelled at him out of control, "You should know why I hit her." I could feel my heart beating, obviously speeding up, and my breathing was a bit rapid too. I felt chills running through my body from time to time. Asher said coldly, leaving other things aside, "Don't you know what your own body is like? She was doing it for your own good. And you still think you're not in the wrong?" This time I didn't say anything. I huddled up and sat under the fountain. I was trying hard to suppress the emotions that were getting more and more out of control and my body that was gradually going weak. The night was gradually getting darker, and the neon lights on the roadside lit up. Thinking that she had won the argument, Hadley was still going on the offensive and tattled to Asher in a low voice, "I've never seen such an overreaching woman. It would have been all over if she had just given it to me earlier. She's really being unreasonable." When the fountain burst out into a dazzling and magnificent water curtain, I was like a rigid stone and fell straight backwards into the pool. Point 10 My heart disease relapsed. I was rushed to the local hospital. It was said that during the rescue, Asher was so out of control that he almost barged into the rescue room. In the end, it took the combined efforts of everyone to stop him. Hadley was watching with her eyes wide open and mocking me for my poor health. Beside me, she was immediately shouted at by Asher and even cursed at, being called something like worthless. Hadley left on the plane back to China, crying all the way. I had a brush with death again. When I woke up, I saw Asher standing by my bedside. He looked haggard with dark circles under his eyes as if he hadn't slept for days and nights. His pair of dark eyes stared at me in a way that sent chills to my heart, but for the first time, I felt a sense of satisfaction. So he could feel pain too. It must be hard for him to watch the heart of the person he loved gradually losing its beat. Looking at him, I said calmly, "Let's get a divorce." He had been taking good care of me, but he had never treated me as a person with dignity. I didn't want to live like this anymore. Hearing this, Asher let out a sarcastic laugh. "Divorce? You think I'll let you go?" He rarely lost his temper with me like this. "I told you not to come to Europe. Why didn't you listen? Don't you know that heart disease patients should control their emotions? Your body is in such a bad state, and you still dared to argue with Hadley. Sarah, you're always so self-righteous." His words were getting harsher and harsher. The fear and worry of these past few days had made him take his anger out on me, but he forgot that if it hadn't been for Hadley, I could have had a safe trip to Europe. I closed my eyes, too lazy to say another word to him. Suddenly, Asher grabbed my face and forced me to look at him. He warned me word by word, "Sarah, take good care of your body. Don't cause any trouble. Do you hear me?" I smiled. "Asher, I don't think I'll live much longer. Can't you really be nicer to me?" After hearing this, Asher slammed the door and left in anger. It took me a long time to recover. By the time I was discharged from the hospital, I had lost a lot of weight. After this incident, my body was far from what it used to be. I would get out of breath even after walking just a few steps. This delay brought us to April. The orioles were flying and the grass was growing. I returned to China. Currently, I'm in a cold war with Asher on my own. After getting home, I went straight into the bedroom. Asher followed me and instructed, "I have some work to catch up on. I'll be staying at the hospital for the next few days. The medicine is on the bedside table. Remember to take it." Okay. Actually, I didn't care where he was going. Maybe he was going to comfort the heartbroken Hadley. Maybe he had some other purpose, but it had nothing to do with me. After Asher left, I opened my phone and consulted a lawyer. The lawyer said that if Asher didn't agree, I might have to live separately for more than a year before I could get the divorce. So I started looking for houses in other cities without Asher's knowledge. However, since my last hospitalization, my body hadn't been in good shape. I often had symptoms like chest tightness and heart palpitations. I secretly went to see other doctors, and the results weren't optimistic. I didn't dare to think that maybe it wouldn't even take a year before Asher would become a widower. That day, I went to several places with the real estate agent. At 12:30 noon, passing by a small park, I was so tired that I had to sit down and watch the kids beside me feeding the pigeons. Just then, I scrolled through Hadley's WeChat moments that had been updated just a few minutes ago. The old man's apology is still so touching. I smiled and casually put my phone in my pocket. The midday sun was warm, making my hair and coat feel hot. Suddenly, someone stood in front of me, blocking the sunlight. "Are you Sarah?" It was a woman's voice. I opened my eyes and was momentarily stunned when I saw the familiar yet strange face. I had seen this face in the photos that Asher had secretly kept. Why did she look exactly like Haley? The woman smiled and tied up her hair. "My sister told me that you bullied her. During the years I was away, it seems that you all thought I was dead." Seeing me staring at her blankly, Haley curled her lips into an aloof smile. "Hello, let me formally introduce myself. I'm Haley, Asher's first love. Can you keep it a secret for me? I want to give him a surprise." She seemed to be trying to see the panic on my face about losing Asher from me. But the dull pain in my chest was like a huge rock, making it hard for me to breathe. If Haley was alive, then whose heart was mine? Haley noticed my shock and took the initiative to explain, "Your heart was donated by my senior sister from the same school. It was escorted back to China by our team teacher at that time. Somehow, it was rumored to be my heart. I've been too afraid to see Asher because I was afraid he'd blame me for leaving without saying goodbye. Now that I'm back, can you give him back to me?" I forced myself to stand up and walked in the direction I had come from. Tears gradually streamed down my face. So all the torment of these years had been a joke. I could have lived a happy life. The wind blew, and it gradually got cooler around. I shivered and took out my phone, preparing to call Asher. The moment the call was answered, everything went black before my eyes and I fell forward. 12 I was admitted to the intensive care unit. It was said that when Asher was rescuing me, he used all means available to pull me back from the brink of death. Of course, there was a price to pay. My whole body was filled with tubes. A long white tube was connected to the ventilator at the head of the bed, and its end was inserted into my throat, making it impossible for me to speak. Many people came to see me, saying that I would surely get better, but I was sick, not stupid. Their expressions told me that I wasn't far from my deathbed. When I woke up from the complicated dreams, someone was holding my hand. Asher, wearing a white coat, was standing beside me, looking at me gently. "Sarah, you're awake." The first thing he said to me after I had the organ transplant surgery back then was also this. At that time, it sounded like music from the heavens, but now it was like the whisper of a devil. I subconsciously wanted to pull out the tubes, but found that my hands and feet were strapped. Asher coaxed me in a low voice, "Be good. Get well. Don't resist." I remembered once telling Asher that if I was terminally ill one day, I didn't want to be rescued, because I had seen the people lying in the intensive care unit, just like me now, with no dignity, at the mercy of others. Obviously, Asher didn't respect my choice. He was my relative. He chose to use all means to keep me alive until the last moment, right? How could I expect him to have a soft heart for me? He had never loved me. He only loved that heart. Didn't he know that Haley wasn't dead? I started shaking my hands tied to the railing violently, trying to tell him the truth. Asher frowned. "Give her a shot of sedative." Then, he smoothed out my messy hair and gently kissed my forehead. "Sarah, go to sleep again. Don't worry. I'll always be here with you." I couldn't help but close my eyes and fell into a deep sleep. I don't know how many times I've been to the gates of hell. That feeling is really unpleasant. Every time I was rescued from a coma, I would fall into deep despair. Even the nurse beside me would say in a tone of pity, "Professor Asher is really ruthless." He insisted on rescuing her 6 times and several of her ribs were even broken. If I were the family member, I would surely let her go with dignity. Yes, even outsiders know this principle, but Asher doesn't. Asher hasn't come to see me much recently. Because every time he comes, I would make a scene. Once or twice, he could still be patient enough to coax me, but after many times, he began to get impatient. "Sarah, who can you blame for becoming like this? Wasn't it you who insisted on going to Europe? Be obedient, okay?" As time passed, I also gave up the idea of telling Asher the truth. After all, I couldn't speak. I was weak all over, terminally ill, and it was also difficult for me to write. In the end, even death had become a luxury. I often wondered what Haley was doing. Did she think it was fun to play hide-and-seek with Asher and not show up? If she had come earlier, could I have gone with dignity? I lay in the intensive care unit day after day and had lost the ability to perceive time. On a warm afternoon, the sun shone through the window and just fell on me. It was the same as when I had just had the surgery many years ago. Full of hope suddenly, I felt that this moment was also full of hope. Back then it was about life, and now it's about death. My body suddenly felt very light, as if I could write several words. Asher seemed to sense something and said casually, "Sarah, can you calm down? Live well and I'll promise you anything. This is a special medicine. You'll get better after taking it." How ridiculous. This scumbag, I don't know if he was really comforting me or himself. Perhaps even Asher himself didn't notice that since we got married, the most common thing he said to me was, "Take your medicine well." He didn't even know what my favorite food was. The restraints had been loosened a bit by the nurse earlier. I grabbed the pen beside me and tried hard to write something on the small whiteboard. At the last moment, I wanted to leave something behind. After thinking it over, I started writing. Suddenly, the nurse walked in. Professor Asher, someone is looking for you outside. She said her name is Haley. Asher was stunned. After a brief silence, he suddenly let go of my hand and rushed out. At the same time, everything went black before my eyes. I heard the alarm of the monitor, announcing that I was in critical condition again, but this time, Asher probably wouldn't come back. The moment Asher rushed out of the office, he saw that familiar face. Just like back then. Clean and cute, Haley had long, flowing hair down to her shoulders. She walked up to him with her hands behind her back and asked with a smile, "What's the matter, Professor? Don't you recognize me?" Haley. Asher suddenly had a feeling of being in a different world, murmuring, "Didn't you die?" A trace of annoyance flashed across Haley's face. It's all because the journalists back then didn't have a good enough command of foreign languages and misheard. I've been abroad all these years and never knew how I was reported in our country. But that heart. Haley blinked. That heart was from a senior sister in our music troupe. She died in an accident and her heart was escorted back to our country and donated to a girl. When mentioning the girl, Asher's heart skipped a beat. At this moment, Sarah suddenly occupied all of his rationality. Ignoring Haley's shouts, he walked straight inside without looking back. Somehow, he had a feeling that if he didn't go back quickly, he would never see Sarah again. When pushing open the door, Asher was still thinking about what Sarah was trying to write on the paper just now. He suddenly really wanted to see it. Turning the corner, all he saw was white. Many colleagues in white coats were gathered around Sarah's hospital bed. On the monitor beside it, a straight line was stretching out mercilessly. There was no more fluctuation. Asher's mind went blank. He heard Dylan's voice, as if announcing the time of death. Who died? For the first time, Asher felt that the sounds of the instruments in the intensive care unit were really annoying. He rushed over, pushed aside the crowd, and saw Sarah with a peaceful expression. Her face was very pale, quiet, as if she were asleep. Clearly, just a few minutes ago, Sarah was looking at him. She seemed to have smiled and tried to write something. Asher gently touched her face and called out, "Sarah." All that responded to him was a cold corpse. A sense of absurdity instantly swept over his mind. How could Sarah be dead? There was a hint of sarcasm in Dylan's words. Sarah has no parents. You've just found your first love. I guess you don't have time to take care of Sarah's afterlife affairs. Let me and my wife handle it. These days, Dylan had just learned the reason why Asher had treated Sarah like this. Just for a heart, he had made her suffer so much. This matter had spread in the department. At the moment, no one was on Asher's side. Asher suddenly remembered something and suddenly looked at Sarah's right hand. He saw the pen that Sarah had used hanging down from the whiteboard. Beside it, there was a crooked line of floating words, mixed with initials and pinyin. Barely recognizable, "I like eating malatang." Asher suddenly remembered what he had just said. Take your medicine well. I like eating malatang. This ordinary sentence now was like a heavy hammer, smashing open the floodgates of a reservoir. As if in an instant, their past was laid bare. Letting Asher clearly see how awful he had been. He had said countless times to take the medicine well, but he didn't even know that she liked malatang. Asher suddenly went crazy. He grabbed Sarah from the bed. "Sarah, get up. I'll take you to eat malatang." Dylan and the nurses rushed forward and tried to stop Asher. "I'll take her away." Dylan punched Asher hard. "Come to your senses. Sarah is dead." Sarah had just died not long ago and her body was still soft. She was being pulled around and her head hit the bed railing with a thud. Dylan was really angry and roared, "Asher, do you believe I'll call the police? If you loved her so much, what were you doing before?" When Sarah was alive, she had come to the department several times. She had brought many small gifts for everyone and had helped with many little things. Everyone liked her. Now watching Sarah leave, everyone was both relieved and sad, relieved that she had ended her difficult life. sad that such a nice person had left. Asher had completely lost his means reason or rationality, so it can be translated as rationality. After taking a punch, he suddenly grabbed Dylan's collar and demanded, "Why didn't you rescue her? How could you be a doctor?" Dylan seemed to have heard something ridiculous. He pushed Asher away hard and sneered, "Asher, have some conscience. Do you really think Sarah lying there liked you dragging her back from the gates of hell again and again? At the last moment before she died, what she saw was your back as you abandoned her. What, should I have let her live to see you marry Haley and drink your wedding wine?" These words were like a sharp blade cutting open Asher's heart, exposing those private and shameful secrets to the public. Making Asher feel ashamed. Before leaving just now, he clearly heard the beeping of the instruments. At that time, his mind was full of Haley. He thought maybe it was some other patient who needed to be rescued. With Dylan there, what did it matter if he left for a while? Dylan sneered, "Asher, you don't deserve to be a husband, nor do you deserve to be a doctor." Asher held Sarah, looking dazed, and didn't say a word for a long time. When Dylan returned to the office, he found Haley lying bored in front of Asher's computer playing Minesweeper. "This is a hospital. Unrelated personnel, please stay away from the doctor's workstation." Dylan just felt a sense of desolation. Haley stared at him in shock. "Me? I'm Haley." How could Haley have the nerve to proudly utter this name that had haunted Sarah all her life and even caused her death? Dylan couldn't hold back and questioned, "I heard you came back a long time ago. Why didn't you show up earlier?" "Of course I was waiting for Sarah to die." Haley stuck out her tongue. "I didn't want to be the other woman." Dylan was so angry that he turned his head away. He didn't want to ask any more questions. He was afraid that he might not be able to restrain himself from hitting a woman. Surprisingly, after Sarah's death, Asher didn't get together with Haley. He insisted on handling Sarah's afterlife affairs by himself. The deceased's body couldn't be kept in the hospital for too long. Sarah was taken to the funeral parlor on the same day. 3 days later, the farewell ceremony for the body was held and the body was cremated. Asher thought that since Sarah had no relatives left, she probably didn't have many friends either. However, on the day of the farewell ceremony, the place was crowded with people. Dylan and his wife were there, along with many classmates he had forgotten and friends from various industries that he didn't know. Everyone's eyes were red. Obviously they had been crying. Several old classmates came over to thank him solemnly. "Professor Asher, thank you for allowing Sarah to live for so many more years. Please accept our condolences." Although it was an unintentional remark, it was like a slap in the face for Asher. He felt so ashamed that he lowered his head with his eyes turning red. "This is the paper kite made by Sarah. I brought it here. And the photos she left at my place when we went skiing that year." Many of her belongings were handed to Asher, but at home, he had only packed up some of Sarah's daily necessities and a locked diary. Only then did Asher realize that he seemed to have never really known Sarah. She had a wide circle of friends and diverse interests. She liked off-road driving and big adventures. Compared to the long and dull life she had later, Sarah's original life was more like her name, short but brilliant. In these past few years, Sarah was like a lifeless tree, being extremely cautious. She even had to ask for his opinion when eating a bowl of malatang. He had really been so bad to her. "Asher, it seems you didn't have breakfast this morning. Let's go out and have lunch together at noon." Asher looked up and saw Haley's face. She was wearing lipstick, makeup, and her eyeshadow even had glitter. He recognized it at a glance. For no reason, Asher felt a wave of nausea in his heart. "If you're not here to pay your respects to her, you can leave. There's no need to show up here looking like this." All these makeup tips were taught to him by Sarah when they first got married. Whenever he was going out on a date with Sarah, she would dress up like this. Asher's voice was not low, attracting the attention of the people around. Haley was a bit at a loss. "Asher, I didn't mean it, get out." Asher gave the order to leave. Unfriendly looks were cast at her from all around. Haley's face changed, and she slunk out. Asher didn't know what was wrong with him. Logically speaking, he shouldn't have spoken harshly to Haley, but that's what he was thinking in his heart. He could even picture Sarah whispering in his ear, "Look, look. She showed up at my funeral wearing makeup. She's such a two-faced bitch. Kick her out. Kick her out." Asher knew that Sarah definitely wouldn't be angry if he did this. After the funeral, everyone's lives got back on track, but Asher seemed to be stuck in the time when Sarah was still alive, unable to move forward. He cancelled his surgeries and holed up in the small house he shared with Sarah all day long. The pain of losing Sarah, as time passed, gradually turned into a continuous dull pain. It turned out that what he liked wasn't a heart, but a person. This person had appeared in his life when he was young, stayed with him for several years, and finally turned into a small urn of ashes. He managed to open Sarah's diary. On the first page, it read, "Yay, I got married to Asher." The delicate handwriting covered the whole page, showing the owner's excitement. Asher's heart was tugged hard as he flipped through the pages one by one. At the beginning of their marriage, Sarah filled her diary with little things about him and her. "I bought him a tie yesterday, and he wore it to work today. He must think I have good taste." Asher remembered that purple tie. At first, he didn't want to wear it to work, but in the early morning, Sarah sleepily wandered over and tied it for him. She just forgot about it herself. Many years had passed, and the tie was nowhere to be found. Asher smiled inexplicably. Today there was a heavy downpour outside. My colleagues and I were stuck downstairs and couldn't get a taxi. Asher came to pick me up like a godsend. So happy. Today I had a fight with him. How annoying. He actually forgot my birthday. I blocked him for 2 hours. 2 hours later, okay, I was wrong. He prepared a surprise for me. When they first got married, Sarah didn't know the truth about his proposal. She would really act like a newlywed wife, shamelessly acting cute towards him, asking him to do this and that, and getting angry with him. He didn't really dislike those days. In fact, he even liked them a bit. Counting back, it had been a long time ago. So long that if it weren't for this diary, he wouldn't remember what the lively Sarah used to be like at all. Asher read slowly, word by word, immersed in the memories of those days and forgetting about time. He was surrounded by a brief moment of happiness which came to an abrupt halt on a certain page. "So he really likes Haley." This simple sentence lay on the bumpy paper. The handwriting was even smudged. When Sarah wrote this sentence back then, she had cried. Even Asher, when he saw this sentence, felt as if his heart had been hollowed out. His lips trembled, and he gently stroked the paper, feeling as if his life was over. "Sarah, who on earth told you that?" Immediately after, he found the answer on the following page. Hadley. That young girl whom he had always treated like a child and taken good care of in every way. "I hate Hadley, and I also hate Haley, and I hate Asher even more. I'll never talk to Asher again." Asher's heart was torn to pieces. It was from this moment on that Sarah, like a withered flower, quickly lost her vitality. She no longer sent him messages frequently, no longer asked him to do this or that. As if she had suddenly become sensible, she silently accepted all his requests. Her diary, which used to be updated every 2 days, became only one entry every half a month. The lines were full of pain. "Hadley told me that Asher would marry her. Because she looked the most like her sister. I regret having the surgery." From the diary, Asher saw another side of Hadley. She was selfish and mean, constantly using words to stimulate Sarah, making her gradually become depressed and taciturn. On the night before going to Europe, Sarah left a line of writing. "I want to get a divorce." Asher's tears fell. He wanted to get up and move Sarah's belongings closer to him, but his weak body couldn't support such an action. He accidentally knocked over Sarah's medicine bottle. The white pills scattered all over the floor. Asher went to pick them up, but the moment he touched the pills, he froze. As if he had discovered something, he grabbed the pills and brought them close to his eyes, examining them carefully. Then, his body began to tremble. A terrifying roar came from his throat. After working in the medical field for so many years, how could he not recognize what these were? These were not the medicine he had given Sarah at all, but cheap supplements. Sarah. Why on earth? He desperately searched for any clues left by Sarah. It turned out that when she came back from Europe, Sarah was still chatting with friends, saying that she would visit them next year. Sarah wouldn't take her own life on her own initiative. The only possibility was that she didn't know the medicine had been switched. This speculation made Asher feel so suffocated that he could hardly breathe. He didn't dare to think whether it was an accident or something done on purpose. Sarah was a careful person. She wouldn't be so confused as to mix up health supplements and life-saving medicine. In the third month of staying at home, Asher called the police. People who knew Asher were all stunned when they saw him again. He had lost a lot of weight, with sunken eye sockets, giving off a sense of being terminally ill and on the verge of death. He sat in front of the police, like a madman with an abnormal mind, constantly repeating the statement that his wife might have been murdered, yet unable to provide any evidence. Haley received a call from the police and rushed over. Hadley followed behind, timidly saying, "Brother-in-law, please don't be like this. Sarah is already dead." This statement provoked Asher. He stared at Hadley viciously and suddenly remembered that Teacher Zhai had told him that when they were in Europe, Hadley had repeatedly tried to get close to Sarah, and that was when Sarah's illness started to flare up. Haley squatted in front of him, showing a gentle smile. "Asher, it's all in the past. Come home with me, okay? Go home?" Asher stared at her blankly. "Yes, go home." "Okay." He followed Haley back home. As soon as he entered the house, he started rummaging through the cupboards like a madman. Haley couldn't even hold him back. Finally, Asher found Sarah's medicine bottle in Haley's room. It was exactly the same as the one among her belongings. He tremblingly poured out the medicine from the bottle. The moment he saw the pills, he suddenly burst into tears. So the switched medicine was here. And Sarah didn't even know until her death. Haley squatted beside him, supporting Asher, and looked at Hadley reproachfully. "Hadley, what on earth is going on?" Hadley was obviously flustered, but still with a bit of self-righteousness. "She took the wrong medicine bottle herself when we were in Europe. I haven't even blamed her for taking my health supplements yet. I just wanted to teach that woman a lesson." Asher instantly rushed over and grabbed Hadley's neck, roaring, "Do you know this could have killed her?" Haley was stunned for a moment and then tried to pull Asher's arm. "Asher, don't be like this. She's my sister." Hadley was scared to tears. "I didn't know. I just wanted to teach her a lesson." "Sister, say something. Didn't you say that you would come back after Sarah died?" "I was clearly helping you." Big tears rolled down Haley's cheeks. "Don't talk nonsense." "I didn't." The two women were crying together. But Asher felt cold all over. He had said such mean things to Sarah. He said she was overreaching and went to Europe to court death, but in the end, it was he himself who had caused her harm. Sarah hadn't done anything wrong, but because of his indulgence and partiality, Sarah had lost her life. Asher didn't say a word. He pushed Haley, who was clinging to him, away and walked out silently. He couldn't hear what Haley was shouting behind him. He had only one thought in his mind, to avenge Sarah. 3 months after Sarah's death, a major incident happened in City A. The renowned medical professor Asher repeatedly ran over two women with his car until they died. Finally, he crashed the car hard into a tree, causing severe damage to the vehicle. The perpetrator died on the spot. On Asher's mobile phone, there was a message left for Sarah. "I'm sorry." Actually, he also wanted to say, "I love you," but probably Sarah wouldn't like it, so he didn't say it. Postscript of Sarah: the time for the heart transplant surgery was set for early April. During the Qingming festival, when everything was coming back to life, the surgery was to be performed by the famous surgical master Asher. Lying on the operating table and looking at that face, my heart couldn't help but beat faster. He was the person I had a crush on. Unfortunately, he had always been cold to me. To relieve my nervousness, the anesthesiologist joked with a smile, "Do you like our Professor Asher?" Maybe my face turned a bit red. She noticed it. She placed the mask over my nose and mouth and said softly, "Relax and make a wish." I closed my eyes and thought silently, "I want to marry Asher." Perhaps because of this wish, I had a very long dream. I dreamed of things that had never happened before. It was almost like a nightmare. I end the dream, I lived a short and terrible life. Finally, I struggled to wake up from the dream. The monitor beside the bed was beeping. The bright white ceiling was illuminated by the sunlight refracted from the window, the shadows of the trees were dancing and the orioles were flying while the grass was growing. I rolled my eyes and saw the vibrant spring scenery. Full of hope. Sarah, you are awake. I turned my head and saw a familiar face. Asher, wearing a white coat, was sitting beside the bed. Maybe because of the contrast with the dream, he seemed very young at this moment. Seeing that I was staring at him without speaking, Asher smiled slightly and held my hand. The surgery was very successful. Don't worry. I'll accompany you to go out for a walk in a few days. So, the surgery was already over. What a happy thing. Seeing that I still didn't speak, Asher said gently, perhaps, would you like to be my girlfriend? At this moment, time seemed to flow back. Memories flooded back. The painful memories of the past few years flashed through my mind in an instant. It felt like a different world. I could hardly tell whether those things were a dream or a past life. I blinked, pulled my hand out of his grip, and looked out of the window at the warm spring scenery, saying softly, Dr. Asher, thank you for everything you've done for me. But I don't like you. That dream had messed up my thoughts. I needed time to think it through. Asher was stunned for a moment and then pursed his lips without speaking. Soon after, I recovered my health and saw Dylan, who came to make the rounds. Dylan winked at me. Sarah, I heard that you had been chasing Asher. How's it going? I said, I've given up. Given up? Yes. Dylan then smiled again. That's good too. It's more important to find someone you like and who also likes you. On the day of discharge, the spring was bright and beautiful. Dylan came to see me off in person. You've recovered well. Remember to take your medicine when you go back. You can eat a little Malatang, but don't add chili peppers. Okay. After that, he looked around. Huh? Asher is so strange. He said he would come to see you off a few days ago, but this morning he was acting like he was possessed, muttering about atoning for his sins. I don't know where he went. In the dream, Asher drove me home on this day. But now, I had to take a taxi by myself. I smiled and said, it doesn't matter. The taxi I called arrived and honked its horn in front of the hospital. I waved to Dylan. Go back, Dr. Dylan. Thank you. I slept so soundly during the surgery that it felt like I had lived a whole life in the dream. It seemed that I hadn't seen such a spring for a long time. The kids beside me were happily holding kites and running past me. The fragrance of flowers filled the air. I didn't notice Asher with red eyes and trembling all over, looking at my back. Instead, I turned around and walked into the warm spring scenery that belonged to me. The end.